Okay, good. So we mute and then just introduce this panel and introduce each of you. You're looking, you're in the bit of darkness, Luke. It's a bit of darkness here. Some light, perhaps.
You mean the exposure bit?
Mm.
Yeah, there's a zoom setting actually. If you go into preferences and you go into video, you can adjust for low light and swing that bar to the right. I actually have that on myself too, to make it a bit brighter.
Nice. Good to see you again, Faiz.
Much better.
Yeah, pleasure.
Wow, it's almost like a spiritual reunion of sorts, isn't
It
It looks like,
the last lifetime.
it looks like the future.
Yeah.
Yeah, it looks like the future. Okay. So shall we begin? Nice to have you all here. Just let's see you. Okay. Nice to see you all. It's amazing. It's amazing that we're coming together in this panel, an invitation to co-create the future.
Yeah.
Let's see where this will lead us to. And we have our, let the audience come in, and we will, halfway through, we will allow for panelists, I'm saying the audience to, to come in if they wish. They can ask questions just like we did earlier. Okay, so welcome everyone. I'm Tahira, founder of Golden Door. And with me, next to me, is Prajna Murdaya, who is not new to Golden Door. He was with us, was it just yesterday, Prajna? Was it a marathon?
Yesterday or forever.
Was it yesterday? Oh my goodness. That was so fun. It was fun. Yes, 4.5 hours of one after another. We had a video, we had a generative dialogue with the religious leaders. And what was really interesting, we had the female Muslim leader. I've never come across. It was such a great panel of that. And then we had the awards, and Prajna gave the awards results first time. So that was great. And so today we had a couple of panels. We started with natural intelligence. We had on trust and respect. We just finished one on the tyranny of taboos. And now we have invitation to co-create and go on midnight. Multiculturalism goes on to tomorrow, about 10 panels in total. So let's see what today leads to. I would like to introduce you to Prajna, who has joined Golden Door's executive committee, and he is a founder, and he runs Shoemaker Studios, right? A music studios, award-winning. And he is a, what do you call yourself? An investor, visionary, Constellation. Would you like to introduce yourself, Prajna? I'll go one by one to introduce everyone.
Yeah. Maybe I'm a universe surfer. I like to call myself a universe surfer.
Universe surfer.
I don't really know. It's hard to pin down roles to me, or for me to pin roles down to myself. But
yeah,
I think record producer and real estate developer is probably the normal way people would call it. But those are things that just came recently to my life. But I just sense the vibe and try and manifest good things. That's kind of what I'm trying to do.
Yes.
Yeah.
And you've also come from a background of big business, and you have a very spiritual mindset. So you want and highly creative. You're building up this, hopefully the biggest creative hub, right? In Asia, that's your targeting, right?
I guess it's ending up that way.
Vision.
Kind of like a snowball.
Yeah.
It could be the biggest in the world now that we look at.
Oh, wow.
It could be but we could get into that later. But
yes, so you're bringing all that together. Okay, so next I would like to introduce Luke Cohen. Luke was just with us, Natural Intelligence panel. This is the second time with us. And he's an ecopreneur, he is a poet, he's a speaker, inspirational speaking, writer, author, he is so many things. You'd like to introduce yourself, Luke?
Sure. Hey everyone, good to be back. Nice to see Jess and FaZe. Nice to see you again, Jeremy. Prajna, pleasure to meet you. Tahira, how's it going? It's been you're on a marathon here.
I'm okay.
Yeah.
I'm okay. I'm not on every panel, though, by the way. This is just second one.
Oh, okay, good. Okay.
I'm not.
Okay, so
Thank God, no.
good to know. Good to know. You've been distributing the weight. That's
Yes,
good.
yes.
So yeah, I'm at the intersection of sort of new systems and culture. I bridge the gap between industries and demographics through a focus on taking the mystical and bringing it into the practical. So what this looks like is the creation of land projects, eco-villages. This looks like bridging ecosystems of projects, players, definitely heavily involved with what FaZe is doing and High Vibe Network. So as an individual, I have my own healing practice and my own music that I put out and content that I put out. And then within the world stage, I bridge a lot of different leaders and communities that wouldn't normally connect and bring them into connection, because I really feel that in this time, these different communities have gifts for each other that they need to learn from each other. So I've put on a lot of different gatherings where you'll have philanthropists and indigenous leaders in the same space for the first time, where you'll have new systems design people with people that have been years of social impact entrepreneurship interacting for the first time. And so we need to learn from each other. So I'm a big world bridger in essence, and a community builder at heart, really. That's really my drive is to create community on the planet, authentic community. Yeah. So,
looking on a shift in culture, right? That's what, yes.
Culture as the focus, because that's what drives the values, which drives the behavior and our choices. So if we have a new culture, then we can have a shared value system that we can really stand behind as a unified culture.
Okay, great. Next, Jeremy. Jeremy, we are new to each other. I have not had a chance to have a talk with you, but I know from what Fair's been telling me that you're doing such great things. I know about gaming, what you're doing, but could you introduce yourself?
Yes, absolutely. And yeah, first off, thank you so much for having me here. And it's fantastic to see all of you again. It's a real honor to be here. And special shout out to FaZe for really introducing me into this whole world. And yeah, a bit of my background, I've been in the tech sector for about 20 years now, and spent the last 10 years over at Blizzard Entertainment, which is one of the larger game studios in the world. And I've always been very passionate about social good and social impact. My parents were born in the Philippines in extreme poverty. They immigrated over to the US, and I was born and raised in New York, where I struggled as well in my own form of economic scarcity. So, poverty and scarcity has always been a very, close issue to my heart. And, I was so fortunate to have grown up, got a good education, was able to land a nice job in the tech sector and live in this world of abundance, but also be grounded in this world of scarcity. And that whole dichotomy of these different unequal worlds always really struck me. And, in 2020, I was just, inspired, and rather it was a wake-up call for me. During the pandemic, I'd lost my mom and family members and friends, and I asked myself the question, what am I doing with my life and the industry that I'm in? How much of this is really giving back to people and planet? And unfortunately, it's unsatisfyingly low. It's less than 1% of that, money, energy, computing power is flowing back to help solve problems in a real world and for people and planet. So I launched my social impact organization, Leyline, to focus on bringing the engagement and power and fun of gaming and the abundance of economic power that crypto and blockchain and NFTs are bringing to the digital world, and really funnel that all to nonprofit social impact organizations, and really start paying people to do good and have fun while doing it. So that's kind of the concept behind what we're trying to do over at Leyline. And we're partnering up with as many people as possible, because I think this whole blockchain world is really about collaboration and co-creation to create this abundance. And it's how FaZe and I got connected, and how I've been kind of connected to this community. So it's such a beautiful thing to be here. So happy to talk all about that.
Great. There's a lot in common with everybody here. I'll mention that later. So Faiz Nazarali was introduced by Prajna, John, yes, doing great things for social good, the new economy. Faiz, you want to introduce yourself, what you're doing now?
Yeah, it'd be a pleasure. And thank you once again for bringing us all together. And yeah, this feels like an amazing group. There's a lot of sense making that can happen in groups like this. And what I really believe is that we're all philosophers. We're all really figuring out, what is our human experience here for? Like, what are we doing here? And some of the best questions are actually, you can't answer them in a single answer, that they're very hard to answer, but it's a discovery process to answer them. And so I think that we're going through some massive shifts in the world. And we're at a point right now where sense making and the elevation of our consciousness as the custodians of this planet are of the foremost importance. We can look at symptom relief of fixing damage that's happening, or we can look at not only doing that, but fixing the root of the problem. And so a lot of it comes down to our programming and our psyches and our experiences that maybe are tarnishing our abilities to really show up in our highest selves. And so what I like to really focus on is the solutions and how we can rise to the occasion, how we can show up in a stronger form than ever before, and use this as an operating system upgrade. And if you look at the computer analogy, we're all really running code, which are the programs that we run. And a lot of that manifests in the outer world. The inner world manifests in the outer world. And so if we can really harness harmony between our inner world and our outer world, I think a lot of us will be living a much more fulfilled life. And so that's what we're creating, and that's the ethos behind High Vibe Network.
You're also a speaker. I've listened to a couple of videos. You're spiritual, mystic. We're very interested in that, and also the fusion. Everybody here is moving in the mysticism in some ways. I know that. And not only that, also as futurists, because you're seeing the future and what it should be brought in now. And you're bringing also the spirit. So next, Jess Magic, as her name represents, magic, miracles. The songstress. I think you're also a poet, I'm not sure. Songs, yeah. And she's doing great things. She moves people with her music, with her vibe. And do share about yourself, Jess.
I love this theme of futurists and world bridgers that is very present in this group. I would say that for me, one of the ways that I use music as a tool, music and storytelling as a tool to unify, to penetrate the heart, to be able to bring diverse groups of people together, and to be able to actually feel what it's like on an embodied level to harmonize. And so I'm really passionate about bringing together groups of people from various lineages, various cultures, various religious upbringings, and creating a space that feels non-dogmatic and non-denominational, where that's accessible for lots of different people, using music and storytelling. And another place I feel like I'm bridging worlds is actually between our humanity and our divinity, and helping to fill a little bit of what I witness as some spiritual deficit, but using things that are really accessible and loving as ways where we can start to really commune more deeply with larger intelligence around us, our higher selves, and to feel like we're not just going through this three-dimensional reality all by ourselves, but to do it in really grounded ways that people can have an embodied experience of something that's larger and bigger and more expansive than just their own day-to-day reality. And so that's something that I love to offer, that I love to do. And I'm really, really grateful to be here. I think what you are doing and stewarding is really, really important. And then regarding the future, I had a real vision that it was important for us to shift from consumer culture to creative culture. And part of that being the inevitable direction that we're going with AI and robotics and all these things. And there's going to be an inevitable point where what we actually need to be connected to the most is our creativity, is the things that make us uniquely human that can never be replicated. So I also feel like that's a spin on futurism in a way that I really pay attention to, is how can we right now prepare ourselves for the future by shifting out of that consumer mindset and culture into one that is inherently creative.
That's right. That's right. So I'll explain why we're having this panel on the Golden Door Awards. The Golden Door is really truth and integrity of the written word. And we launched in the year 2020, the year which somehow we didn't know this was going to happen. But it's like, we were led, I was led, that something would need us to shift to the individual. Myself, I'm in technology for 20 years. I was only focused on technology. So now we have to shift to the individual, and not just that, to the heart, to the soul, and to raise that technology. Because things are shifting so quickly. You see how much we've changed so much. The world has changed so much now. I have not met a physical being other than 2-3 people, unless going to the shops, but interaction, very little. And interaction in terms of, I can't go to shops without having the vaccination. There's certain rules, everything has changed. So there are 2 groups of people forming, one who wish to conform and one who wish to change things, have a different kind of world. Where there's freedom, there is creativity, and a new form. And based on the foundation of truth and integrity. Because the world we are now is deceptive. It has got its own agenda. So many people are confused. What is this agenda? Some people know, but many still don't know. And they just follow. Do we just follow, or do we work right now on creating a better future at the same time? Without a battle, but peacefully, and using our heart and mind and our creativity, going back to creativity, because our essence is a creative human. And looking to the future and bring it now, and collectively. This is why the generative dialogue is happening. It's no longer about the individual alone walking a journey. We need to be so open that we share everything. What we're envisioning, what we're feeling, and what we like to see with each other. No holds barred, courageously, even if the ideas are ridiculous. Even makes no sense, but it will make sense later on, right? That's the objective of this panel. And always to take the pathway of truth and integrity. It'll take us to the right door to open. Okay? So what I'm going to do now is that we will just start on what we feel it's important to address, and anybody can start. What you feel that we need to look into and needs to be co-created now as a group, as a collective with the audience. And just take a few minutes. It's like a time to retrospect and look within, and we'll see what happens from there.
Well, if I were to potentially kick off with a topic, one thing that I've been concerned about for a long time are these fundamental root causes behind the challenge of truth in our current society. And, as Faye says, like addressing the root really is the key. And a lot of it comes down to system design of how our economy is set up, how our systems of governance are set up as well. And I really think that as we build these newer digital systems, tie them into our cultural systems, our spiritual systems, I think it's very important that we're very intentional, that the incentives are aligned towards cooperation and truth and integrity. I think that's one of the biggest issues today with our current system, where those incentive mechanisms are not aligned with that. And so I'm just curious to, what's some initial responses to that, maybe to kick off as a topic. Maybe that's a good way to get going. What do you think? What do you guys think?
Yes, absolutely.
Absolutely relative.
Yeah, it's super relevant. The selfish nature of man will rule the world is like an old philosopher. I think Adam Smith said that. And when I first heard that, I was like, that doesn't sound so great. And I think that there's flaws in that model. I feel like if self-interest rules society, the systems will be built like a slot machine where they're imitating something that's meant to have people win, but it's 100% lose ratio at a net level. And I think that's what society is moving into, unfortunately, with a lot of the really fragile, complex systems. Speaking about system design, I feel like the systems are not designed to serve the collective; they're designed to serve the few, and that leaves a lot of people wanting something different. And I think that we're at a systemic change at the moment where a lot of people are waking up, and these are people in all different statures, people who are running things right now, people who are, sort of in the bureaucracy, and then also people who are kind of out of that system, but also being impacted by the system. And I see that there's going to be, several different divides in society. I think like there's a wealth divide, rich and poor. There's a race divide, incumbents versus non-incumbents of land, or, different colors. And then there's, vax or no vax. That's becoming a divide as well, because there's a lot of people in both camps, and all of them think they're right. And both of them, I think, in quite extreme senses, which is a little bit scary, I think. And then the other one is really around, tech enabled and non-tech enabled, which I also think is going to be a pretty massive divide in society. People who are using blockchain, who have access to AI, who are using, the likes of smartphones and stuff like that, and the people who don't have that. And you're already seeing that there's a big surge in people who are learning to adopt. And I think we've gained 2 billion internet users in the last few years, which was the biggest, influx in a long time. And things that you're doing, Jeremy, with Leyline, I think are really incredible around helping people generate income through basic technologies. But back to the point I was making is that I think that there's these deep divides, and the system is propagating these divides. And so now it's time for a brand new system built with brand new materials, because it's ground up thinking that we really need.
Essentially, what you're calling in, FaZe, is a culture of connection, because all that separation exists because there's a lack of connection. There's a lack of actually knowing each other and each other's stories. How do you bridge a gap between, two different worldviews or paradigms? Is if you hear the person's story, you can probably have empathy for their human experience. But if you hear their worldview initially, you can reject it. And so we need to resurrect a culture of empathy, and a culture of mutual regard, and a culture of connection. And so, just bringing it back to that piece from natural intelligence, as well as a culture driving, conscious culture driving decisions, and the value systems inherent. We need to resurrect an earth-based culture that's prioritizing ecosystems and environment as a focus, as the bottom line, right? So the way that business has been done on the planet has been completely extractive, and it's the systemic disconnection from our own environment and our own ecosystems that has siphoned us into these chambers of disconnection. So the disconnection between, when I say a lack of connection, right? We have a culture that we need to get back to connection. That's one of the main ones we need to come back into, is a culture of connection with the Earth Mother, because without that, any of the systems that we're creating, if it doesn't include an awareness of, or a priority of, we're actually not sustainable. So we're building flawed systems on top of it's like creating a runway into a wasteland, where we need to create through lines into a regenerative living system that is biomimicrous and harmonious for the future generations, right? So all the ideas that people have out there about different things, you know, some of it can sound really great and amazing. If it's not inclusive of that, then it may not actually bring about those things into fruition if there isn't that inclusion of our Earth Mother as a huge focus. So I think she's a unifying factor to bring us all back into connection. Our water, you know, where like how our soil's doing, all these things creates a very practical through line of understanding of, wow, we're all affected by place and where our water comes from. And so a lot of the elements of the things that were given freely to us, clean air, clean water, fire, all these things have been taken, homogenized, and sold back to humanity, right? So we've lost that direct connection to the elements. And so having regenerative systems that allow people to be empowered through their direct connection with these elements, I think are absolutely essential. And then technology that's informed from the spirituality of the culture of Earth can then become life-serving technologies as opposed to extractive and separation-based technologies. So we can bridge the divide of spirituality and science through an Earth-focused narrative and an Earth-focused culture.
Talking about bridging, Prajna is on the other side in a way, because you're with the industry in some ways, right?
I came from that industry.
No, I'm saying when you're setting this creative hub, you're dealing with industry, yeah?
Yeah. I always find that it's always more fulfilling to be able to do well in this world, as you know, as well as we do well spiritually. Like one doesn't have to have spiritual wealth and not have physical wealth at the same time. But you know, it may actually become a singularity. They become one and the same thing if you know. I really believe that reality is a projection of what's inside, and so if you can reconcile those two, then the external reality will just make itself, you know, as such. So you know, there are a lot of really important themes that have been discussed around the world that are really big, they're very pressing issues like climate change and the divide between the rich and the poor. You know, there's clashes between cultures. And when I look at those, I feel like, wow, those are problems that are just so big. I don't even know like where to start. At the same time, because of my spiritual upbringing, I've always been taught that everything is of the mind and our mind is limitless. And I don't necessarily say that if I apply my mind to changing one particular thing that's wrong, I think is wrong with the world, I will be able to kind of drive that. But I like to think about it as, you know, things that the problems and the great things that occur in the world are really projections of our consciousness, and they're empty in nature. Not to say that they're meaningless, but they have the ability to change in an instant. And so you may think that these things affect billions and billions of people and that they're big things, but at the same time, because you can conceive them, they can change just as instantly. And somehow the way that they're going to change, we'll find sort of, there will be a path to changing that. So so I remembered, I think, was it Luke that was mentioning that, or was it Fies that was mentioning that, you know, people are increasingly becoming more consumerist, and you know, the ego or the I is sort of like the main thrust of humanity, and I think it's difficult to get people who are inherently, and I agree with you, I think people inherently start with a sort of egocentric view to try and look at you know, being empathetic or altruistic as a motivation to change their behavior. I think that the ultimate goal is great, but my goal is to find out how to get people to what they want to accomplish first and create conditions for them to do that until they realize that once they get whatever their ambitions, what they're ambitious for, they'll realize that it's still empty, and they'll look, you know, they're looking beyond their ego for more fulfillment because they think it's empty.
I want to share one thing. You know, Prajna, you live in Singapore, and I've also been born in Singapore. And Singapore is a very highly consumerist society. Shopping malls everywhere. This is our tourist attraction is shopping mall. I grew up with that. Frustration all my life. To a point that having a breakdown, I moved to Bali, started writing. So all of us, in some ways, we are quite similar in the way that we don't want that kind of world. Even though we're all well-read, we know stuff. Of course, we live in this world, but we're uncomfortable with it. I don't know what level of uncomfortable. I was very uncomfortable, very, very, even though I was born in it so much. So we do these projects, that you're doing a project in Singapore, and we're doing all these things, but how can we really make changes? Because we know all this information. How can we make it happen in Singapore and in cities, rather than escaping? Oh, I'm going to escape into the far out, and I don't want to escape to Bali. I can do it once, but escaping is not a solution. It's part of the journey, but we need to sometimes return. We need to return to the city, the life, and then bring that and change. So I always ask myself, how do we make those changes? As people who are spiritual market players. Yes, Jess, you saying something?
Yeah, well, I love that you brought in how do we return, because something that I think is really important here is we tend to live in a culture of out and up and away.
Yeah.
And there is so much, I mean, and connecting back to the root, what's at the root, there's so much trauma in our species. There's so much trauma because of colonization. There's so much trauma because of being from different lineages where our ancestors have been part of, on one side or another, of either having their own culture, their spirituality, their earth-based practices stripped away, their rites of passages taken, or were descendants of ancestors that were part of that stripping away, part of that colonization. So there's massive, massive trauma. And I think that that's a collective and a personal trauma. And what I'm sure most of us, and probably a lot of the people watching right now, know about trauma is that when we have trauma, we tend to disassociate, which means we find safety either in our mind and away from the body, or literally we go out, we leave our body, and we start, it's almost like a soul leaving the body, our presence leaving our body. So I feel what I witness is that so many people either find that the safe place for themselves is in the mind, where we're starting to spin out and really only prioritize what is in the mental sphere. Because if we were actually to come and return into the body, we'd have to deal with a lot of the emotions and the trauma, whether it's from our own lifetime or from our ancestors, that's alive there. And that's very confronting. Humans are very conditioned to want to avoid pain. So the fear of actually having to address the trauma or the pain or the memories that live in the body from our lifetimes or from our epigenetics it's a really big deal. So I think there's so much of going out, like going up and out, and which, that ties into the consumerism as well, of like, oh, if I buy this thing, I'll be okay. If I make this money, I'll be okay. So much externalization of our reality. And I think that having spaces, having rites of passage, having safe spaces, having healing rituals, having ceremonies, working with healers that allow us to actually feel like it's safe to go in and address some of the trauma or some of the things that have had us feel disconnected between our heads and our hearts is extremely important as a step, as well as on a more collective level, really recognizing some of these places where we've participated in colonization, even if we didn't think that we did it in our own lifetime, getting real with ourselves around that so that we can actually forgive and be forgiven and start the reparation at the root level. So I feel like those are a couple of pieces of how do we come back home? How do we return? How do we take a step that's possible for our own selves, that in our sovereign choice?
Yes.
I love what you're saying there, Jess, and I completely agree. I think that's this really important step that we hopefully can unlock for all of humanity. I think that's just an essential piece and responsibility we have. And to tie along with that, Tahira asked about what are the solutions we can put in place. I feel like that's one activation at the individual level that we want to enable and empower. But then there's also this systemic change we need to actually create the conditions for people to actually make that happen.
Prioritize that, yeah.
Yeah, and one of the challenges there is that it's very difficult to create those conditions when there's so much scarcity and struggle. And one of the things I realized, going through my own healing journey over different years, you need time and you need money and resources, or you just need to have enough of a stable, secure life to open up these opportunities for exploration and for healing and for community. And so it's why, at least in my narrow lane, I'm trying to figure out, okay, what are the ways we can, crank these levers in the system that's going to change like mass behavior and, have a sort of proper influence at scale. And, you think about what are these big levers that could do to change, societal behavior. And one of them, which like really kind of drives a lot of it, is economics. It's like, where's the money flowing and how does that impact people's day-to-day behavior and lives and their opportunity? And the other part of that, what I saw too, is like, there's just like fun and engagement, which is like start to dominate all of our digital lives now. How do you kind of plug that in together where the economics is flowing and the fun and engagement is flowing towards this opportunity? So then the big thing I realized, there's, I don't know if you're familiar with Maslow's hierarchy of needs, which really talks about basic human needs, and you need your physiological needs, and you move social needs, and then you go into your individual and self-actualization. A lot of people, about 2.7 billion people on the planet, are stuck at the physiological layer where they can't even like properly afford a decent life. Yeah.
Just in survival.
So my hope is that, if you can imagine eradicating poverty for 1.4 billion people living under $2 a day, or giving access to people to the economy at 2.7 billion people, if you can lift them up out of this physiological scarcity, what is the potential, the some human potential you can unlock, the some human healing you can unlock? It's so powerful. And that's just setting the conditions for improving the world. It's not even solving the real big problems. It's just you got to put that power into people's hands. So that's the hope. If we can focus on eradicating poverty, it's baseline. Please go ahead, Luke. Yeah.
No, the build is so beautiful, Jess. You nailed a root cause in Germany. I think you brought in another lens of the reality of that. So like, I was just feeling so much moving through my whole being when you both spoke, and this quote kept coming to me: is you can't grieve until you get off the battlefield. This is something that in PTSD work with veterans, and the survival state of the collective is a form of battlefield. It's in survival. So trauma work can't be prioritized, right? Or self-realization when you're on a battlefield. And actually, to Jess's point, the majority of people, regardless of their, I mean, it's hard to say, definitely the economics is a huge factor, and people in the middle class and upper class are in their version of a battlefield too, in the busyness, in the coping mechanism, and the numbing strategies to not deal with the trauma as well. So there's this intersection that transcends, economic status, and the relative point of what you're saying is absolutely a massive indicator. So the idea is how do we create a culture that makes it fun, interesting, and a priority to potentially look into your own personal healing as a way of contributing to the society at whole. It's not a focus. It slowly, becomes a focus in entrepreneurship and personal development, because that actually, once you cross a certain threshold, you can steward more wealth if you're a high functioning human. There's different incentives and other sort of brackets of society, but I love this intersection right now of dealing with the deep systemic issues of trauma and colonization, and then the mass wealth disparity. I think we've got a pretty cool pocket of problem solving here.
Yeah.
Yeah. And I just wanted to add that piece of we can't grieve until we get off the battlefield, and what that many people are in their version of that, no matter where you are in society. What's the thing that keeps you out of the body, not grieving what your ancestors didn't have time to grieve because they were in a battle and they passed that on. And so that fight or flight response is still in the nervous system somewhere. We're distracting, we're numbing. Like, how do we get off that hamster wheel?
Yeah. You know, I want to offer a different perspective that supports what you're saying, but maybe is a little bit counterintuitive. And I guess I didn't get a chance to share a bit of my story when I introduced myself, but
Go ahead.
you know, I was born into a lap of luxury, like literally, you know, my parents are billionaires. And I followed their path to become the successor of an empire and spent 15 years running, you know, trying to learn how to run the thing. And I basically got to the verge of divorce, had liver problems, and had a nervous breakdown. Even though the people who built the empire literally were my parents, were absolutely giving me every connection, every privilege, every bit of advice, but it didn't work for me. And I had the abundance, you know, I had the name, I had the reputation. You know, if you Google me, you'll see me on Forbes, you know, but I was miserable. And what I did was I decided to leave the business without telling my people at the office. And I started a music studio in my living room with absolutely no idea what I was doing. And you know, 3 years later, we won 3 Indonesian Grammys and became the biggest music community in Indonesia. And really, it was just about being kind and, you know, and just making sure that I was asking myself every day, well, am I doing something that makes me happy for the time being to the best of my knowledge? But what was really funny was when I started to iterate on that, I discovered that reality was negotiable. That was a conclusion that I came to. It wasn't necessarily fulfillment. It wasn't necessarily happiness per se. But I just started to see miracles happening right and left. You know, like how could I not have any knowledge of the industry and suddenly have pop stars showing up right and left? You know, like there's something that happened that I'm trying to bottle, and with all these things, you know, we see all these problems, and I always ask myself, like, where do I fit in all of this? How do I interface with this complexity? How do I, you know, channel my life force into some, make sure that it's actually, you know, somehow like melding in the force of the universe and being one with it and being amplified and resonating, as opposed to just being dissipated in this short, you know, century or so that we're on in this body, you know, if we're lucky. And somehow my current thesis, it's focused around purpose. Because when I started to ask myself what made me happy, you know, themes started to appear. I didn't even like, you know, keep track, but it just became very clear to me that my purpose was to create space for ideas, create space for dreams, create space, the safe space where things can come in and they just grow, right? And it's pretty much that's it, you know. Even though I was, you know, well, you know, good family, I was very limited financially. So I actually felt very, very much in lack and not in abundance. Everything had strings attached to it. And, you know, I bled for 5 years in my studio, didn't make more than, I don't know, like maybe $3,000 in the 5 years. And I just burned up through all my savings. But then, you know, the 5th year, there was a big classical musician. His name is Yo-Yo Ma, who I was working with, and his management charged a lot of money, but I was able to pull together somehow through random connections, you know, to make more money than I needed to pay off all my investment, and it's keeping my company running through COVID. And then now the government is asking me to take over a power plant in Singapore that's going to be, you know, the project is going to be 1.7 million square feet, several $100 million project. My family now wants to chip in a significant amount of money, an institutional amount of money, and the government is looking to put the direct allocation instead of tendering the land. How does that happen in 5 years? there's some weird way of navigating the universe, and it's always very ethereal. But one of the things that things I always point back to is like if I think ask myself like, am I doing what I'm meant to be? And then I have to remind myself over and over again, because as the journey progresses, you know, the scenery changes and there are bigger people you're talking to and more people get involved. It's like how do you manage all the change? Often, you know, every day I feel like I'm lost, and I have to ask myself, if I remember, why am I here and what's my purpose? Somehow I think it's dangled in front of me and I figure it out. So I just wanted to share that, you know, this element of purpose might be something we could work on.
For everyone to find their purpose.
Yeah, something you said that really resonated was channeling your life force.
Mm.
And for me, what that means is living your purpose. It's understanding why you're fulfilled rather than looking at fulfillment as a destination, right? It's like embodying it.
Mhm.
And often, you know, in this consumer society, we think that a product or a service will make us feel whole, will complete us, but really we're already complete. And when we self-source that completion, that self-worth, that's when ultimately everything is abundant in our lives. And, you know, your inner engineering, your outer engineering can kind of be in unison rather than in disharmony. Yeah, I feel like this Maslow's hierarchy is really interesting as well, is because we start on this self-interest category and we transcend that into actualization. I think beyond that is common interest. It's actually where we're trying to actually serve, knowing that our cup is overflowing and knowing that we have everything we need plus. And I think that's a vibration that is a luxury to get into. And once you get into it, it can be a virtuous cycle, and similar to the experiences you've had where you were on a couch, proverbial couch, moving into like the big buildings, and you did it all kind of, you know, starting from the bottom, which is a really, really interesting story. I've heard part of your story before, but this version was really a nicely delivered one. And it really goes to show that, you know, even the richest people in the world perceptually may have similar challenges to the poorest people in the world, you know, perceptually, and they can also start from the bottom and make it from nothing as well.
Yeah, anything can happen. I think that purpose unlocks superpowers, and everyone has access to that. And I don't think that necessarily external characteristics really are good indicators of one's inner abundance or not. You really, yeah.
Yeah, I totally agree. And there's certainly something powerful about how your mind shapes your reality and the reality of others, and how like your thoughts really are manifesting reality. Whether or not it's like, you know, your thoughts driving the actions and behaviors you do every day that start to shape the world around you and your interactions. And, you know, you can basically be creating your own prison with the ideas that you have in your head and how you think the world is set up around you. So yeah, and I think they're kind of so intrinsically combined, which is like, how are you interpreting the world and reality? Like, what's the external world telling you, and how you shape your idea around it. And I totally agree. Like, humans have so much untapped power and potential in their minds, and it's mostly like, how do we help people realize that? How do we help them get into a situation where they can really tap into that? And I really respect and love what healers and educators are able to do to really bring that about. And it's beautiful when you see it happen. So yeah, let's do it. Let's make that happen all over the place.
I want to play with that a little bit, because Faze brought up the word self-sourcing, which I think is there's a key there. And I actually, a lot of my clients come to me around because they get to a point where they're like, how do I self-source? How do I self-source joy? How do I self-source fulfillment? And I think it's important to recognize that there's so many ways that we've been trained out of our ability to we're born with an ability to self-source, but we're trained out of it. And then there's also kind of a natural codependency that happens inside of us with our parents, and being a mammal that is just very codependent on our survival right away off the get-go. So we're like looking out of we start by looking outside of ourselves for love, looking outside of ourselves for acceptance and everything we need to survive. And then as we are raised, we get put in an education system where we start looking outside of ourselves for authority, for education, and then if we're raised in the spiritual community, we start outsourcing the clergy. You know, we start outsourcing the spiritual domain to who is the person in the clergy, or who's the spiritual leader. And then we go to a doctor and we start outsourcing what does our body need to what does this doctor know about our body, rather than what do I feel around my body. And then you know, after the parent thing, then we start outsourcing love to our intimate partners. So we're constantly going out to figure out who we are, to get what we need. And so there's this, I love you know, going back to the indigenous frameworks also, there's so many different cultures all around the world that have their own version of a medicine wheel. And so often the thing that's the same, whether it's Kabbalah or Lakota, there's these quadrants of the medicine wheel that show us these physical, the mental, the spiritual, and the emotional sectors. And so I think it can help, it's like a compass that can help show us in a way where we're giving away our power, where we're outsourcing, where we're actually becoming consumers of something that's inherently part of our wholeness. And then how do we start redirecting that energy and like, oh, how do I start to reclaim what I know to be healthy or true about my body, rather than just immediately, as soon as I have a cough or a pain, getting a cough suppressant or getting an aspirin or going to the doctor? How do I start paying attention, asking myself, cultivating a relationship with my body, seeing what the wisdom of my body is telling me, and building a communication system, which is very connected to how do we become creative again? How do we start listening? How do we return? So I think that it's important in all of this also to have a little bit of compassion for ourselves, recognizing how much we've been kind of indoctrinated into outsourcing, and then start to look at the ways that we can take the first step at coming back inside to start to self-source again. So just wanted to sprinkle that into this.
I love that term, actually, self-sourcing. It's actually transformation. The answer to co-creating the future is self-transformation first. We can't co-create the future with great grand ideas without our transformation.
Yeah, I'm amazed and also not surprised that all of us were focused on the root of how we can co-create, rather than straight into some tactic or, you know, Slack or something like that. Like someone could have said, oh, you just use Telegram, it's really good. But, you know, instead we were actually looking at this self-sourcing theme, all of us individually. And I really feel there's a lot of wisdom there. And Tahira, you pointed that out. I feel like that's the self-transformation, the custodians of the planet, upgrading their operating system, their consciousness, to be in common interest philosophy, to be focused on unity consciousness, to really be providing the solutionary framework in the vibration of the solution. That's where I feel real co-creation that's lasting is going to come from.
I want to tie into that, Bill, too, with what Prajna was bringing about purpose. If everyone was actually living their purpose, co-creation would be very self-evident, and the plug and play, as we're discovering, is very self-evident. And so there is a through line there that I believe is possible and this is where the idea of a culture of participation comes from, driving the narrative away from, again, consumption to, you have a way of plugging into this collective transformation happening on the planet. It starts with you, and there's ways you can give back, but there's probably a pocket that is your purpose within this global awakening journey that we're on. And so it's normalizing transformation. First of all, we need to, like, this is what transformation looks like. This is the archetypal path of the hero. Here's the hero's journey. We're on a collective journey right now. We're actually still many people are in the dark night of the soul phase of awakening, right? We need meta frameworks to give more context to the journey of transformation, which reveals purpose, which then leads to co-creation, right? So there's so much intersecting context here that I'm really appreciating in this build right now. And I just wanted to give a little synthesis of it, because everything that we're touching on is really yeah, I'm seeing it and feeling it. And it's very exciting and stimulating to sense into what's here.
Yeah. I think one of the things that also might be I thought about through purpose is this faith, and one element that I really have a lot of faith in, again regarding the purpose, is that if we do find our own purpose and we live it, everything will sort of self-organize. We do a lot of trying to manipulate our environment to try to make things right, but if things are right with ourselves, and we're kind of right with everything else. So I just wanted to add that bit into it as well.
Yeah. That's one of my favorite Buddha quotes. I don't know the exact words, but it's, the whole world tries to change everything else but themselves, where our agency is really here, right?
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Yeah,
and that's a very empowering thing to be like. You have. Go ahead, yes.
What?
Everyone got excited. I love it.
We started with such a practical question with Jeremy. He was talking about, you're talking about the social good, the abundance we can create, right? Through a new system, and then now we come back to transformation. So what does it mean? It means that we have to step into purpose as the first step. Is everybody willing to step into purpose? That's a question.
And
it's
I
the
think there's
archetypal
this whole-
invitation.
Please go ahead, dude.
No, I mean, you literally were saying the same thing in your own way as I was saying. The archetypal journey. It's the story arc of the hero's journey. There's a call to action that comes at one point. There's different stages of the breakdown. You meet the mentor. If you look at Campbell's work of the archetype of the hero, this is what's how you come into your purpose. Your purpose is a way for your individual hero to express itself in the world. And we think of we have a lot of like Hollywood and Bollywood like understanding of what hero is, but it's the hero is not an individualistic program as many people think. It's actually for the village. When the hero becomes self-actualized, and even along the journey, there's so much value that someone can add, even when they're in a process of discovery and transformation. You don't need to be completely resolved in all your wounds. You don't need to be 100% actualized in your business as an entrepreneur to add value now along the way of your hero's journey. But this journey, right, is making that first step of like, and having context for it, because a lot of people don't realize they're on a hero's journey when they're in the phase of the dark night of the soul, when they've just lost a parent, or they just had their body just broke down for the first time. They don't know or have the context that they're in an initiation that's asking for a new operating system to be invoked, right? So what is that if we can have more context in the culture for these different pathways of expression of it. So I'm curious what you were going to say, because you started saying that there's a journey, and I was like, oh, it's like the same thing.
So actually, I was going to say very similar to what you said. You just did way better than I did, so I loved it. Well done. Yeah, I completely agree with everything you just said. And there's this interesting phrase that was spoken to me a couple of weeks back, which is, the universe is conspiring in your favor for your purpose. And often, your entire journey is about really finding that, discovering it, and then owning it. And the further away you step from that and you deny yourself like what that true purpose is, the harder and the more strife you end up encountering in your life. And so there's this willingness to embrace it. It's like once you see it, once you understand, this is what I believe I should do, and this is what I'm meant to do, just go with it, and the universe is going to actually conspire to your benefit. It's something to believe in, may or may not be true, but it's very powerful, and it's very empowering and inspiring as well. So yeah, I really found joy in that. Hopefully it's a nice phrase for you guys.
Yeah, I'm going to state something very practical, okay? Because we're going into very philosophical matters, which is great. But the practical thing is that because of what we're going through with the pandemic, so many people I know are becoming Grab drivers. And how are they going to step into their purpose? They can't even pay the bills. And these are very, very intelligent people. suddenly doing things which they hate. They don't want to go there, but they're forced to it. So how do we co-create the great future and allow people to step into purpose, transform? They're forced to spend the whole day doing things they don't want doing, just to pay the bills because of the pandemic, because of all these things. It's very challenging. Very, very.
I'd love to give a little, it's funny that you brought that up. Where I was kind of feeling the pulse is to give a little something, I guess people can decide whether it's practical, or whether it's useful for them. But I also feel like this is potentially part of the secret sauce that helped Prajna manifest what he manifested on some level. But I think that we have a tendency to, like, the word that keeps pulsing for me is trust. And
faith.
Yeah, trust and faith. It's like, I think that we can have a tendency to look at all the things that aren't working out and build a real case for, well, like, my wife left and then my dog died and then now I can't pay, and we're like amplifying that because we're looking at, we're building a case, and all those things might be real circumstances that might be really challenging. But in terms of the power of the mind, when we start to reframe to be like, well, what if I start looking at all the things that are working out for me, even if they're so small, like, oh my gosh, I forgot that someone owed me $100 and they just gave, and now I actually can get food for that, like whatever, starting to build a case of how life is working out, or how, it does work out for you when you trust your intuition, or how you are being loved rather than all the ways you're not being loved. It's like starting to actively seek out the real experiences that start to build a different case for ourselves, so that we can actually start. That's the best way I can put it, is like build a case, like just pay attention to what case we're building. And I think that that's something that can be really supportive. Even when things are feeling really hard, there's still moments of magic, even if it's just that your favorite color butterfly landed on the couch, or whatever. It's like, pay attention to those things, and maybe that is a sign that everything's going to be okay. Or, start to open and see the world a little bit differently through a different lens of what's working out for you versus what's not working out for you.
Yeah, and sorry, go ahead, Jeremy, please.
Thank you, Prajna. Tahira, I think that question you state, or the problem statement you gave out, is exactly the one we're trying to solve with Leyline, which is, first, if we can create economic abundance is what enables people to have choice in what they decide to do, and opportunity to have a pathway. So, I love someone's comment in the chat about, being a cab driver is still service and maybe noble work as well. And probably the challenge is it may not be that for everybody. And so it's because they don't have a choice, they're stuck in that. So, for us, it's about, this whole crypto world, this NFT world is creating immense financial abundance. And it is, we have to make sure that it's being distributed in a much more equitable fashion. I think that's one of the key challenges of this new boom. And for me, it's, economic abundance in and of itself doesn't have purpose. So you have to make sure you're tying it to the right purpose. And to me, it's like, okay, let's tie it to the purpose of, are we protecting and stewarding our environment? Are we tying it to social impact and compassion and love? Are we enabling it to empower education and teaching? And so I think when we can tie the abundance and the economy to those acts of compassion and love and giving, that's where you supercharge all of this, naturally beautiful stuff. And then you actually start paying people for that. And then they feel great about it, because it's different to, kind of get a check in the mail for literally doing nothing versus getting paid for something that, added value to something in society or to the planet, or it created this intrinsic motivation in you. So I think that's really the key. It's you have to build systems and design them such that the abundance is tied to people's sense of what they think is important, what they think is meaningful. And I think there's a lot of power and a lot of healing that can come as a result of that all over the place.
Yeah.
I'm sorry, Prajna,
Jeremy,
please hand it over to
I
you.
think you're grounding something in for us. I'm feeling a shift in the conversation wants to happen at this midpoint. I'm just going to throw it out there. Just knowing what Phase is up to, hearing more about Project Story, what Jess and I are up to with culture, what you're doing. This piece around DeFi, culture, entertainment, like there's something here, and I just want to throw it out there that maybe we can dive into more into DeFi and culture and some of the like things that we're all up to, and actually how those things actually intersect as and how that's creating the future. Because there's I think we need at the beginning to have some sense making and
Yes.
ground into some of our shared values and the journeys that we've been on, and have a meta framework of access on, you know, again, context for what's happening on the planet, the call to action, the breakdown, the breakthrough, the wealth disparities. Here's the problems and here's how we're solving them. So I really love, I also think it's really cool and interesting, Jeremy, that you come from, you know, this background of literally like poverty, and you've named it as such, and clarity, and there's no shame around it. It's just like, this is the truth of my journey, my lineage. And then Prajna at the other spectrum, and we're meeting in the middle of the heart, just like Jess, you know, is such an advocate for the heart, and we're bridging the heart and the mind. So we're doing it right now in this conversation. We're bridging worlds, and we're bringing in a really important conversation. And I just I feel like when you started speaking, I was like, yeah, let's dive in. Let's dive into this next build. Let's go into this next build around culture and DeFi. I think it's one of our biggest through lines right now with all the pieces that we're all holding.
I might add something there. That's amazing. And so Jess touched on something, and she mentioned it in the chat as well. And this is something I deeply believe as is one of the few absolute truths that I think is the case all the time. And there's not very many things I can put on that list. And this is that if you're focused on the problem, you're in the vibration of the problem. And that's because that's your focus, and you're going to create more of like kind. And with the vibration of the solution, when we focus on the solution, we create more of that solutionary, visionary solution thinking and manifestations. And our heart is also in that place as well. We can embody it. And so back to Prajna's story, I think he was embodying a solution that he wanted to see, and that manifested in the outer world. And that was the sort of secret sauce, in my opinion. And you know, with what Luke's saying in terms of DeFi, NFTs, and Jeremy was also touching on this, and I think everyone in this room, you know, has a level of understanding here, is an evolution of our consciousness. It's a way that, you know, if you look at money as energy, like everything is energy, right? Money is energy. 90+% of money is stored in less than 10% of the wallets on the planet, right? Owned by people. And so you can say that's an energy block of sorts. And so how does that energy block get opened, right? Anytime there's an energy block, the system wants to open that block and have energy flow. And, you know, you can call it the universe, Mother Nature have, you know, conspired to create this technology, DeFi, NFTs, and blockchain that have this symbol and this word around it. But really what that enables is a new financial system that enables a migration of traditional finance into decentralized finance. And the writing's now on the wall, like TradFi, as they call it, is being eaten by DeFi and is going to be much bigger than the whole financial system as it stands today. And if you look at gold, you know, it was about 10 trillion in some of the highest amounts that gold market cap existed. And gold used to be our currency. And as soon as fiat currency came over top as a derivative of gold and then decoupled, it then became 100 trillion. So it 10x'd its predecessor. And we're seeing that trajectory is happening in the way cryptocurrencies are operating, and also because there's so much upside in a smaller market that is currently crypto compared to the existing market. So even the existing market are very incentivized to participate in this new sandbox. And so the game theory is already there, the upside's already there, and now the infrastructure layer has had enough time, almost a decade of building, that now the infrastructure layer is there, and we're seeing this, you know, this sort of avalanche movement. I think someone said avalanche earlier. That's precisely what's happening here. And I really believe that this is our opportunity to inject this consciousness into these solutions, where we're focused on the solution, we're focused on collective growth rather than only the growth of few. And we can all thrive. It's not an opportunity cost. Like if we're all living in a thriving way, that's not going to prevent others from living in that way. It'll actually encourage them and be contagious. And that's what I feel is one of the biggest shifts, is the move from scarcity to abundance, where the systems can actually be hard-coded for abundance.
leaving rivalrous consciousness or competitive based narratives and cooperative models around that. I'm just going to put one little piece into on that build, and then I know there's some magic coming through some of the folks on the stage as well. After the plague, the bubonic plague, came the Renaissance. All right, and this is a great analogy. So I know that because the pandemic's so alive in a lot of our hearts, I think it's a good, meta framework is we are actually standing at the precipice of a massive cultural renaissance on our planet.
Yes.
And if we create that narrative, if we hold that reality, just like Jess gave us that framework of like, this isn't happening to me, this is happening for me. This idea that we're moving into a cultural renaissance. The thing that was interesting around that Renaissance period is that one of the first things that was introduced was perspective. So paintings were all flat in 2D, and third dimensional perspective was introduced. And it was, and the philosophers and the artists were meeting in these small clusters of consciousness, and they were getting into deeper spiritual philosophies, and then new perception entered reality and shifted an entire culture. And that was all making the external world more beautiful because of the internal state of realizations that were happening as well, right? So we actually have more people practicing yoga than ever before, more people getting into personal development than ever before. So this shift in consciousness that's happening, it's going to want to express itself and make the world more beautiful. So what's interesting in this economic DeFi piece, there's a quote from Jose Aguilera that says, we move from time is money to time is art. That's the paradigm shift that we can see with DeFi into a new cultural renaissance. What FaZe is talking about is the cultural principles, the value systems can drive that marketplace now in a different way than when it was controlled by cartels that go back to the Crusades. Like the banking system started with people needing to go to the Crusades, and they didn't know who's going to protect their coffers of gold. That was really where it all started. And so again, this idea of leaving the battlefield, right? What does a society look like when we're not in fight or flight? We're all evolving spiritually and living into our purpose, and that culture is driving the metrics of our economic system that's available to the collective and no longer centralized. So this framework of a renaissance, I want to infuse, and I think that it's an exciting energy to bring into our build, because that's the future we're co-creating, is a new renaissance. And if we choose that, and this is the last piece I'll drive home, and then I know that there's a bunch of stuff that's coming through everybody else. Yeah. Is again the idea that the narrative that we choose is the world we're going to create. So this feeling of powerlessness and despair and all the loss, again, it's the breakdown that comes before the breakthrough. When we know that, we change the narrative, and this is what we need to empower humanity again in their purpose, is to know that the narrative that you're orienting towards is what's going to create the future. It's like how the meaning that you're giving it actually is co-creating reality, right? And we're collectively doing that. The Toltec believe that we're in a dream. We each have our own individual dream, and then there's the shared dream. It's the play of consciousness. And so it's really important to create a really positive framework and a new narrative, because the narratives that we're being bombarded with, it is so fear-based, is so antithetical to the human spirit, that we need to retake back our narrative and say, actually, we're moving into a global renaissance. That's what's actually happening post-plague. How about that?
Global renaissance.
Yeah. I'm really excited to hear Jeremy and FaZe talk maybe even more specifically about what they've been doing around this. But what I wanted to share to piggyback on you, Luke, is for me, something I've been tracking for a long time is how do we shift the archetype of the starving artist to what I call the thriving artist, recognizing that they can be a leader and a guide for those who have actually been artistically starving because they were told or bought into the idea, or because of their parents, which kind of brings me back a little bit even to Prajna. Your story was so perfect, how relevant the whole thing was, but of like where so many people have taken a path that is where they're denying their own inner creative or their own inner musician or their inner poet or their inner painter, because they were told that you can't make money doing that. So you can do that as a hobby, but you need to do something else. And they pour their life into something that is more economically viable. And yet then they're killing off or starving off, sequestering a part of their creative spirit that like, but I just want to sing and dance or make art or make music or produce. And I think that there's some really cool things, going back to blockchain, crypto, DeFi, like NFTs that are happening right now that actually are starting to build opportunities for more wealth in connection to that which is inherently creative, that I feel like has an opportunity to bridge worlds. And I'd love to just toss that over to you guys and anyone who wants to speak a little bit more into that.
Yeah. I wanted to add, I think all this, I'm just awash in amazingness. Thank you so much for articulating everything in such a beautiful way. I'm full of ideas. But I remember being about the comment about the Grab driver. I think it is very practical for one to know what they want to accomplish, even though but they don't put the burden on themselves that that's like what they're tied down to for the rest of their life, or it becomes their thing. Like just pick something and go for it, right? And even for the time being, I love the word "for the time being" because it means you can always change it. And I find that as long as I use whatever resources I can get to head into the direction where I want to go, no matter how infinitesimal the progress, somehow that's a signal. That's a secret sauce thing. Like, the next step may feel that much bigger, but something's helping you along. And by the third or the fifth step, you're expending that much effort to make a small step, but the actual real world progress is like exponentially big. But it has something to do with like some element of focus and resourcefulness that when you iterate blocks a certain kind of inertia, and your environment can be completely transformed. And that, like, I, with all due respect to all the people who are meant to be Uber drivers or Grab drivers, and of course, like, my life would be much more inconvenient if they didn't exist. There are some people perhaps who are resigned to that, but perhaps can try going towards a direction that makes their heart sing a little bit more, and being okay with that little bit of progress, because that's a magic trick. Like, there is a saying that every journey of a journey of 1,000 miles begins with a single step. And I used to think, dude, that is such an arduous quote. It's like but actually, when I that thought actually occurred to me when I was going through this weird and wacky transition. And what I find is that the first step feels like a step. The first 4 or 5 steps feels a bit bigger, but it's probably you're like, well, I'm getting the hang of this, so that's cool, whatever. And then after a while, you kind of forget that you're taking steps. And then like you look around, you're like, where am I? And it feels like every step you make is a small step, but everywhere around you, it's a huge step. And so to you, the steps are small, but to everyone else, the steps actually grow bigger. That's like some metaphysical thing that I've noticed over and over again. It's like one of those like panic button things. Like, if I feel lost, is there a thing that I want to accomplish? And can I use whatever I have to just get a little bit closer? Because when I iterate on that, like, I'm out of jail. So I just want to share that.
Okay. I'm just going to bring one person from the audience who's messaging a lot, Richard. And he was talking about time equity. So I'm going to bring him from the audience for a short while. Let's see what he has to say. It's always good to get the audience involved a bit more. Okay. He's from Canada.
That was a great share, Prajna.
Hey, thanks, bye.
Thank you, Prajna.
Welcome, Richard.
Richard just wrote a book about moving away from capitalism. Are you there, Richard?
Hey, hello, good day.
Thank you for your messages. You got,
You're most welcome. I'm a very vocal person.
okay. You got anything you'd like to share with us or add on, or what Prajna just said, or?
Yeah, I'd love to share a couple of things. And Luke, I want to acknowledge you for bringing Jose Aguirre's into the equation, because to me, time is your most precious asset. And what I've been able to do after 40 years in the financial business is blend the concept of time and the concept of equity, removing, okay, capitalism because of an answer called time equity. You guys are all sitting there and you're talking about money in some capacity and capitalism in some capacity. But what you fail to recognize potentially is that this stuff has not worked for hundreds of years. It's well protected by the elite. They have their secrets, they know what they're doing, they know how they're doing it. And subsequently, if you had the goose that laid the golden egg, you'd protect it with everything that you had, in the sense of if that's what differentiates you from everybody else. And the only thing that we constantly hear about is equality, but we don't know how to put it into place. And I'd like to suggest one thing. My time is no more valuable than yours, nor is your time more valuable than mine. And time is a universal law, which means that it cannot be manipulated. Someone referred to man-made law. I think it might have been Rob Salisbury, one of the judges, who was going back and forth in the comment section. But time is such a precious thing in the context of, you all know that you'd spend every penny to get another day or another week or another month to be with a loved one that maybe you didn't fully contribute to in their life because you were busy chasing money. The point I'm trying to make is this, is that we've got to be open-minded to look at these new ideas. And I find it really kind of funny that you guys aren't all jumping around going, that's a great idea. Time is of the essence. We can all become what we want to do when we shift our thinking and decide that we're going to become entrepreneurs in time. So I give you the fact that, very simply, time is universal, so we can't mess with it, which creates trust and transparency. Trust and transparency create equality, and equality creates a true democracy. You can't buy your way into a democratic process because you have money. Good for you, I'm really happy. But the last 500 years and the results that we look at today are a testament to the fact that hanging on to the old crap is really, honestly, not the way of the future. So you might scoff at my book or my concept of time, but you know what? Let's use that as a platform to start a discussion that gets to the stage where we can achieve all of these so-called utopian ideals. I'm not utopian, I'm a realist. There's a lot of challenges to put the concept of time into place. But as an example, blockchain, just as it would measure every financial transaction, will measure everyone's time transactions. And because you do what you do and I do what I do and other people do what they do around the world, we all get to share 100% equally with the results of our education and our actions and the things that we love to do. So I appeal to you sincerely, please check me out on richardmkernicki.com. I'm a pleasure to be here. I was very pleased to have been selected a bronze winner in the Rex Cavamere Award, and being a part of the whole Golden Door. And guys, the Golden Door is open. It's open wide. Move yourselves away from what's already been. Start to envision that future in a way that has no connection to the past. Like, wake up today and say, I don't know anything about yesterday. I often ask a lot of, especially people with MBAs and financial degrees, when they look at my concept without even reading a page of my book or the front cover, they automatically label me as a socialist or a communist or, you know, a whole bunch of different isms and ists. And it's kind of nauseating because they really don't know that I'm a causationist in time. I want to bring the value back in time, okay, of your time, so that we all stand together and united and do the right thing for the world. Imagine if there was no cost, okay, to do anything. Would there ever be an excuse? Can we, how fast could we solve education, energy, the big healthcare, the big issues if we had no cost attached to it? How long would it take?
Hey, brother, I want to invite you to land this ship. Leave us with one prompt. Thank you for adding to the build and bringing some of the pieces that you're bringing into the fold.
Thank you. It's my pleasure.
Yeah.
It's great to listen to you guys bringing in all your ideas too. But I can say this: each of us want the same thing. Okay, we want to be happy within ourselves, and everybody's concentrating on that happiness being outside themselves. It's not. Trust me, I'm 64 years old, okay? My father died when he was 56. I don't know how much time I have left, but I love every minute of it. I love every minute of the challenge to present time equity, okay, to people who close their eyes and immediately reject it. So, you know what? Yeah, you can tell me one thing, but your actions speak louder than words. And
Richard, I actually love what you have to say. And you know, in fact, you know, a lot of the principles of time banking are what we're actually utilizing for our economy we're building with the ley line point system. So I agree with you that time is this ultimate equalizer for human beings, because that's the only one finite thing that we have universally that's equal. So I'm 100% with you there. And I think time banking is like already this fantastic system that is in place today. It's just starting to really apply at scale. So I've been very inspired by using that. And I think blockchain is an excellent way to build a system of trust and exchange of time across the globe. So I think there's definitely, I'm totally in line with you there. And I would love to check out your stuff and talk about that more and learn. I do want to say though, that, you know, blockchain is this incredible weapon for social change that is different than all the legacy money systems in the past. The decentralized nature of cutting out centralized institutions and individuals with outsized power is so fundamentally game-changing that, yeah, we may be talking about money in this conversation, but we're talking about money distributed in a totally different fashion where nobody owns this thing. It's owned by everybody and nobody at the same time. That to me is something really powerful. And we have this opportunity where, you know, literally we are printing our own money. If you look at all the different projects that are getting launched here, we're printing money out of nowhere, which is, to me, it's fine if you have general consensus around, is the money behind this project actually adding value and it's trustworthy? So I think there's this responsibility of these new projects in the DeFi space and DeFi world to build these currencies entrenched on truth and integrity and transparency, and to be like tied to real social positive value. So I think that is the big challenge of where are these currencies now being created from? What are the fundamentals that it's built on top of? And then who controls it? So I think one solution, one recipe to prevent these institutions, again, from corrupting and co-opting these currencies is through DAOs. I do believe DAOs will be the future of how we decentralize governance and how we give trust back into the systems that are no longer controlled by people anymore. It's controlled by consensus built into the protocol. So I think, you know, this could be, you know, 5 to 10 years or another couple of decades in the making to transition into these new systems of decentralized autonomous organizations that will actually transcend nations. I think that's the key to build this global species, is through these decentralized autonomous organizations. And so, you know, and there's one other piece you mentioned too, which is if you can, you know, take away costs from everything, and, you know, then you can start to move into just time as the key medium of exchange. I think that is possible. The other end of the spectrum is, what if you just create such immense abundance for everybody that cost no longer matters? I think you're going to achieve a very similar result, in that if everybody's rich, then everybody has the opportunity to choose where they put their time and energy. And then it becomes choice and opportunity. So
Jeremy,
maybe
you
we could
are
accomplish on
rich.
both ends of the spectrum.
Jeremy,
But
you
anyway, if
are
there's
rich.
like,
Yeah, we're all rich, you guys. Okay, we're rich with life, and we're rich with vision. And Jeremy, I salute you. Okay, and in the essence of the conversation, because I love the fact that you slipped right back into the whole monetary system. I don't need paper. I mean, I remember somebody told me once, well, money doesn't grow on trees. And guess what? It does. Right? Where does paper come from? Okay, so we're caught up in this world that's 1,000 years old from the standpoint of the protectionism that goes around the concepts of capitalism. And think about this. We're all involved in what they call SROs, or self-regulatory organizations. Those are the ones that create the MBAs that we go out and do. When I wrote my book, and my book is right here just for the fun of showing you guys that it's at 3 o'clock, because I represent, if you will, what do we call that? The New Age calendar? Anyway, it's 3 o'clock and I'm walking into the brightness of the future and leaving my money behind. It's not about the money, guys. It's about what we do. And if you ever watch Star Trek, one of the things that Roddenberry said in one of the Star Trek movies was that capitalism actually reduces our potential. And without any kind of a monetary system, the simple reality is we have no reason to have any holdback. So we're not, right now, I think that money and the work around money is a complete farce. I mean, think about this. We don't have any money. Okay, the government in the United States is so overloaded with more than $10 trillion of debt, and they keep telling everybody the same story. Don't worry about it. Everything's cool. You know, we'll just partner up with China and we'll all become rich capitalist pigs. How many people, okay, does anybody know how many billionaires were made in the last year versus over the last 20? There's a statistic you should check out because of, okay, all the changes that have happened through COVID, and those people who immediately adapted to, as an example, screen sharing like this to increase our capacity for our technology, okay, but yet put us into an environment whereby we feel safe by being in our own room instead of going out and socializing with the public. I have a lot of respect for many cities and peoples of the world today who are fighting for, if you will, the democracy that they think that they had, and yet we don't have it. We have tyrannical governments which are forcing vaccinations into us. We don't have leadership. Nobody's telling the truth. And yet we're all quietly, just submissively dismissing it. And I applaud all those people all over the world who are getting up and going downtown to their city centers and yelling and complaining peacefully, okay, that this stuff needs to be changed and stopped. And it's up to us. Okay, because if you're not doing it, who is? And Jeremy, I'd like to invite you. I want to create a global party. I've already registered the Time Party in Canada, and I've already registered all of the .coms and everything else that I need to expand. And I'm looking for people who want to take my message, okay, and build in your message, because this is something for the people, by the people. And I want to create a global impact, so we're not standing with our pants down when the WEF turns around and says, hey, guess what, man? You guys can't own anything anymore. Everything that you do is rented, and you're going to love it. You know, we're going to take away everything from you, and you're going to love it. If you don't know about the Great Reset, seriously, have a good look at what the WEF people are trying to
that's a big point.
shove down our throats.
That's our biggest call to action, actually, is what you're talking about there, is like the fact that there's this force that wants to take away our human freedoms. And then that's actually the biggest why around how we should show up, you know, better than ever.
Thank you. Thank you very much for your attention. I encourage you, if you like, If you want to challenge your mind and challenge your brain, connect with me. I'll send you a digital copy of my book, complimentary, so that you can read it and familiarize yourselves with maybe a thought that might help you achieve where it is that you're going. And if I can help you get to where you're going, then please do not hesitate to reach out to me and say, Richard, we had an amazing conversation, or Richard, you're so full of shit. I really need you to, oh, pardon my language, I'm sorry. I'm Canadian. We apologize profusely when we make verbal errors of that nature. But seriously, guys, I'm 64, and you are the next generation. I'm not. Okay, but I hope that I can help you achieve your goal in a much faster time, because we need it. Our world is at stake.
Richard, Jess wants to say something. Jess?
Yeah, thank you. I just would love to say something to you, Richard. I feel that what you have to say and what you know is extremely valuable and useful. And I feel like if I could give you a little bit of feedback and for whatever it's worth, a little bit of support, there is a way that I see on some level you really, maybe it's because of a long life or many years of feeling like you had to fight to be heard, or fight and feeling like you had such a counter narrative or counter viewpoint from the dominant public narrative that you had to force it forward. But what I want you to see is there's actually a group of real allies here. Like we're not on different teams, we're not on different pages, we're all exploring a new narrative and a new way of looking at things, and through our own lens. And I feel that there's a way that your message and your voice could be more received, with just like being being an invitation into what you know, rather than jamming it at us in a way that feels a bit aggressive sometimes. And I feel like what you have to say and what you've learned is really genuinely compelling and super valuable and has so much wisdom. And so I actually care about your message getting out there. And I do feel like we're here to learn from those who have been around for more decades than us, and to pick up the torch and to like lift the load a little bit of you having to fight hard. And so just an offering into the softening of being an invitation, because again, you have a lot of value to bring.
And I'd actually love to add in there too, Richard. Totally happy to jump in and get a copy of your book, and jump into your community as well, and really absorb. I feel like we're definitely online in terms of, again, like coming back to like time being this universal equalizer for humanity. There's something really beautiful and powerful about that. And that to me is definitely a dream. It's like, we want to be able to build that bridge. How do we transition from the system that we're entrenched in today into that new type of society? It's a journey. There's a lot of work to do that. It doesn't happen in a snap of fingers. And it's now, let me tie it to this practical, like what we're doing right now, to kind of also kind of bridge what Jess was opening the stage for before. So to give an example, some of the stuff we're doing now at Leyline, we have ground operations in Haiti, South Africa, Botswana, and Indonesia. We're actually directly serving impoverished communities, people that are desperately poor and starving right now. And I can't go to them and say, hey, here's a bunch of time on a blockchain and say like, okay, you can feed yourselves now. Like, you've got to be able to provide them with like their physiological needs. And you need to use the existing system to actually provide that first before you can propel them into this new digital world. So, we're investing first, like, hey, we and we learned a lot over this past year. It's like, you first come there, it's like, hey, here's the cell phone and data plan and solar battery. You can now connect to the internet and start to create your own art. You can start to get DeFi and stake your coins and get a loan and run your business. But before they can take advantage of that, they have to eat. They have to like go to the doctor. They have to like get fresh, clean water. And so we're like, oh shit, we got to deal with these physiological needs first. So it's like, you have these steps to take to get people to this baseline where they're now open to these totally new paradigms that have never been exposed to ever. Like, these people have never been on the internet. So we have to teach them, this is what the internet is. This is how you get access to education. This is how you protect your passwords. This is how you don't give away your seed phrase, and there's scammers out there. So, there's like very hard practical realities we need to bridge and overcome. And that's the hard work we're doing right now.
That's
like
the
we're
key
on
word.
the ground. Yep. Go ahead.
Going on.
Please, Luke.
That's the key word, is bridge.
Yeah, but I really recognize that something amazing is happening, and we're creating a space where, everyone's coming out really authentically in their own shape and form, and that everyone else is really actively jumping and like embracing it. And I just think it's really beautiful.
Thanks so much. I just wanted to say very quickly to Jess, Jess, thank you so much for your beautiful words. I'm sorry, I am a bull in a china shop. I'm a promoter personality. I'm a highly intuitive, highly extroverted person. And quite frankly, at my age, I don't really give a rat's ass what anybody might think about me. But your comments are well taken, Jess. I trust that maybe my enthusiasm will bring your gentleness to the program, and you might be able to bring a lot more awareness around the world that I can. But it's got to all start somewhere. So I apologize for my roughness, but I am so transfixed in what I'm trying to present. I'm so focused on helping people and helping the world. So I just want to say, it's amazing. Now, I just want to say one thing to Luke as well, and because I didn't finish with Jose. Jose was one of the people that actually taught me everything that I needed to know that I didn't know anything about. And I read it through, unfortunately, his works, because he's no longer present to us to give us his guidance in a physical way. But I believe that a lot of his book, or a lot of my book on the time component, and how we discussed and moved into the 13-month calendar, 28 days, and that system. And I know that they were blocked by the United Nations in the past. If you go back to 1933, when it was called the League of Nations, there were already people who were wanting to remove themselves from the Gregorian calendar and implement the 13-month, 28-day calendar. And even in Canada today, established businesses in some cases are still running on that system. But listen, thank you so much for being an ear for me, and thank you so much for your integrity in moving forward. The reason that we are all here, and to Tahira, I want to say thanks so much to you for putting this together, because these are the types of things that we can do now that we didn't have the ability to do a couple of years ago. And we can really, for change to take place, we need 3.5% of the population. So if there's 8 billion people, and there's a 3% on 8 billion, what's that? 240 million people. If we can put them together, we can make time equity become a reality, and move that as fast as anybody else wants to. So I thank you from the bottom of my heart, and really enjoyed being a guest. And I would now like to maybe just sit back and listen to what you guys have to say.
Thank you so much, Richard. You've done what you need to say, and I think it's put a lot of value. I'm going to put you back on the attendee, because we are running out of time. Thank you so much. You've done a lot. Okay.
My pleasure. Thank you so much.
Okay, so I'll just because we have to wrap up. Wait, is he back on the?
I think somebody raising their hand in the chat, Miranda V or something, right?
There's one, because we need to answer these 1-2 questions, then we wrap up. One person has asked, how do you apply spiritual ideals into action in real life? Well, that's another topic we can explore. What is the value?
Can I respond?
Go ahead. Yeah.
Can I respond? Because I feel like there was a like that opened a whole different field. Like the conversation was going, and then Richard brought us some really powerful pieces, and and just want to like actually meet and close that loop, because regardless of his style, he raises some important questions, and there's an unresolved energy in the field now. And so for me, what Richard is bringing is a fully game B model. It's in the new paradigm. It's existing in game B. Some people are existing in game A, and we're actually talking about how do we get from game A to game B. So sometimes game B thinkers, again, they're not received because they're forward thinkers, they're new system thinkers that are actually have projected their consciousness into a world where that's actually working. And like Jeremy, for example, is addressing the real reality right now that you actually need paper right now in this current form. You need some of that paper to live right now. We don't want it to be that case forever, but right now it's a reality. And so how do we get from a paper-based reality to something like what Richard's talking about? That bridge is what building the future is. I think this is the conversation that DeFi, I think this is the conversation that we were having, was addressing the bridge. And it's important to know where we're going. And so Richard's saying, hey, this is where we want to go. Might feel a little jolting, a little far out right now, but it is a game B model. And this journey to from game A to game B, this is undiscovered territory. This is what we're venturing out as neo-pioneers within consciousness right now that we've never done. Okay, so through connection and the human relate, like what Jess just did, she's like, hey, I'm noticing something in my body. I'm feeling some resistance and I want to receive you. That's the bridge from game A to game B, is actually the impact of the relational field in discovering the thing that works, right? So I've been a part of huge festival productions. I've been a part of huge event creations. Everyone has an idea of what's going to look like. And then there's the lived reality of trying to make something real in physical manifested reality. And the journey you go on as souls together to get there. That is more of the journey than we can possibly, and that's always going to be in the mystery, how we inform each other and how we grow in that discovery path as we traverse that bridge. We're traversing new territory. So I wanted to just meet the energy that got brought a bit and just name it, because it's actually bringing something to us, or we're on that journey from game A to game B, and that hasn't happened yet.
Yeah. Yeah, that's wonderful. I wanted to mention, I think Miranda is actually a friend of mine from the Netherlands. She popped in.
What's
and
that?
Miranda, the one who's raised her hand, is asking if she could speak.
I can't. Oh, who's that? Miranda?
Miranda V. In the chat, in the participants attendees list, there's a hand being raised.
Oh, Miranda. Okay, we didn't see that. You know her?
I do. She's a very good friend of mine.
Oh, okay.
A young and very talented person.
It's very interesting how this conversation has flowed, but I think will give us something to think about and feel. I think Richard has done something good. He's brought in the thoughts that we needed to look at.
Yeah. My initial aspiration, actually, for making this hub in the first place was to make money irrelevant. So it totally resonates. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, and I think DeFaze's original quote is that it's just a form of energy. It's a transaction mechanism. So I think the real question is, okay, what do we want to quantify and exchange with each other? What are the things that we find value in? I think that's ultimately the question, or rather the challenge for us to solve. And I do believe it's like you just create a great abundance, then it becomes the things that humans just naturally value the most, which is compassion and love and care and empathy and education and learning and discovery. So I do believe we're on a path there. It's just that, man, it's going to be a lot of hard work. We got to work really hard. We got to work together.
Hard work.
Yeah, there you go. Hard work, my friend.
And also some spirit work. It needs to be, we need to go within ourselves. We've had a lot of mental thinking and some feeling here, of course, but I think after a discussion like this, I like to go back and really go within and feel, where is this going to lead to? And see what forms, what visions come through and downloads. I think that's
it's important.
Yeah.
Because that's the thing that has us, I think it was Prajna that said something before about when the things feel so big, it's like we don't even know where to start.
Yeah.
And so when there's so many things brought to us, we can we can just check out of all of it, and then it's just a nice conversation, but nothing actually gets done. And so if I can give another practical piece of for anybody watching, or for all of us to sift through and feel into what's the one golden nugget that's actually that we have the capacity and interest into either doing the personal work for or taking a tangible step towards. And then that's the way these conversations become more than just conversations, they actually start to move the needle a little bit. So I love that you're bringing that. Like, how do we embody and
Yes.
sift through, find the one thing,
Yes.
not try to take it all on
Yeah.
and jump all the way into game. It's like, yeah, just take the one thing that helps us
Yes.
move the needle. You
Yes.
know.
Yes. It'll show. It'll be revealed to us. That one thing will be revealed, and okay, I need to take this step, and we can do that as we close this panel, and hopefully see what happens next. And
Do you want us to end with one practical step each? One actionable? Is that an invitation from you?
I don't know if you want to.
Here's one action we can take towards game B,
go there too.
everybody.
Yeah.
Closing statement. Closing statements from the panelists. What's the one action you could take to move us towards game B?
Yeah, I have one. So, it's really wrapping up a lot of the different threads that Jess, Prajna, yourself, Luke, Jeremy, and Tahira brought. And what I got out of it is really, the biggest thing about game B is creating the conditions for game B. That's what enables game B, right? And game B is essentially the common interest game where everyone doesn't have to be a winner or a loser, but they can have different degrees of being able to play. And it's not about winning and losing anymore, a comparison, but it's about everyone's own journey. And I really feel like creating those conditions is what's going to make it a lot easier. And the analogy is that if you're trying to drink ice, it's not going to work. You have to wait for the conditions to change and for it to turn into water before you can drink it. And I think that that's where a lot of people get stuck, is they think that they want everything changed overnight, or they want to resist the current system. And I actually think the current system has done so much beauty as well as some of the things that are not so beautiful, like any system. And I think that now is the time that we can really create the conditions for the new system so it can emerge gracefully.
Thank you.
Yeah, I think I want to add to that as well that Tibetan Buddhist monk told me when I was saying I want to transcend everything and become not say I want to transcend everything and be everywhere. And he said, in order for you to achieve enlightenment, you have to be happy with the world as it is, with all its imperfections. And if you're okay with that, then you're on your way. And so I just wanted to share that one bit of information. It is counterintuitive, but that's where we start.
Okay. Your friend.
We had a quote from our ceremony yesterday that was, "Being with reality as it is the sexiest thing we can do." That's the hardest thing for most human beings, is to be with reality as it is, not the way that we want it to be. And I think you brought home one of the most spiritually mature, fundamental metrics of relating to the world. If I were to give my wrap of a practical step towards game B, it's the little things, it's the little behavioral shifts that move us out of dependency, whatever form. Jess talked about codependency, right? Whatever form of dependency that you're still playing out in your life, take charge of it. If that dependency is on something external, it is dependent on a substance. If you're coping too much with this thing, or whatever it is, like wherever you can begin to wean yourself off of codependency and bring it all back to you, that's going to help create game B, because game B needs to come from autonomous, sovereign human beings that are in charge of their choices.
Okay, beautifully said. All right.
Yeah.
One question you can think about from one of the audience to think about and think back: how can we create a system that teaches us to grow, and that way a massive wave of movement will be created? Okay, that's from your friend Prajna. How we create a system that teaches us to grow. Okay.
Jess, go ahead, please.
Well, I could open up a massive can of worms here, but when I really, maybe you've been able to tell this
One
about
sentence would be good.
Yeah, totally. I mean, one sentence that you can take as far as you want is, I actually feel like we need to address our fear of dying, because basically growth signifies change, and change can signify that something needs to leave or be released or die in order for something new to be born. And so I actually feel for us to learn how to embrace change and feel more comfortable and even find pleasure in the growth, we need to address that deeper fear of dying.
Okay, thank you very much. Thank you all. Any last words or one word from everyone?
Yeah, I guess I could throw in maybe my little bit here.
You would.
I'll probably I tend to be a bit more of like a pragmatist and
You're
more
practical,
of an operator. So like I spend like a good chunk of my time really volunteering and working on the ground in trying to address poverty again. Like it's this the whole like theme in my life. And my dream, my mission is really to just eradicate that across the planet. There's no reason this needs to exist whatsoever. Like we've created just a stupid system. And that's 2.7 billion people that we could lift out of poverty. Like, we have the power to do that very easily. And it's a terrible existence, honestly. It's really awful. It's soul crushing. It's painful. It's debilitating. It strips you of opportunity. And we have so much power to change this. So if there's a practical step you want to take, if you've got excess capital or money and you're sitting on that, you can put it to good use, like very, very, very effectively.
Give it to Jeremy.
We are efficient cash distribution machine and building sustainable income for people. And then we build sustainable income for people by paying them for doing good in their communities, by like educating others, cleaning up the community, donating blood. So anyway, just throwing it out there if we're talking about practical steps.
Okay. A few words would be good. Faiz, as your closure.
Yeah, I just feel like creating the conditions for us to thrive is one of the best solutions to focus on right now.
Okay, thank you. And Luke,
full self-responsibility is the pathway into game B. Full self-responsibility is the pathway into game B.
Prajna?
Wow. I just could be very Buddhist about it, but just embrace bodhicitta. Look at the resolving of suffering of everything and all beings without regard to your own. Okay. Logically, it's paradoxical, but practically, try it.
And for me, it's similar to Jess, stepping into the 0 point. Allowing for that death of self. And for me, that was my change, is death and release and embracing new. So thank you so much, everyone. And it was really interesting, meaningful, deep, and enjoyable also. And hopefully we can all meet in person. I'm really praying for that day. It needs to happen. It needs to.
Yes, please. Yes, please.
Let's manifest that. Right?
I have a feeling that something's going to come out of this. I just have a feeling.
Absolutely.
Okay. All right. Have a great.
Let's keep the momentum going, Tahira.
Let's keep the
momentum going.
I'll send you a recording.
Yes.
Build
the connections. Yeah.
Okay.
Build the
hats
connections.
off for
the continuity is the most important thing.
Yeah. All right. Bye. See you.
Love you all. Take care.
Bye,
everybody. Thank you.
Bye, everybody.